This is Idea NOSH, a podcast where we explore ideas that shape our world. I'm Summer Rayne Oakes, and my next guest, AJ Jacobs, and I are going to be inviting you to the world's largest family reunion. AJ, an author and editor at large at Esquire magazine, has been working on a new book that is seeking to show that we are all related, at least within 50 cousins, more or less. Right now, he has 240 million people on his family tree, if you could believe that, and he is not stopping there. You'll even hear about how I'm related to him in this podcast. And if you're into getting to know the fam, then mark down June 6th on your calendar, because we're going to be at the New York Hall of Science. That's where we'll be breaking the record for the world's largest family reunion. AJ was inspired to take on this book after getting a call from a long-lost cousin in Israel, which we'll talk about first. Then we'll get into the good, the bad, and the ugly of being related. And finally, open it up to questions from the audience. What relation is a white man to a black man? A yellow man to a red or brown? Closer maybe than you'd think. For all family trees meet and merge within 50 generations, more or less. In round numbers, 1,000 years, which makes all men cousins, brothers in spirit, if you will, or to be genetically precise, within the range of 50th cousin. But relations don't stop here. Man also has ancestors in common with the chimpanzee and other apes, back 20 million years or so. Plus all the mammals further back, his 10 millionth cousins, if you'll abide my candor. Still farther, the billionth cousin span takes in the whole animal kingdom, and many vegetables and trees. The trillionth must include rocks and worlds. There is no line, you see, between these cousin kingdoms. No real boundary between you and the universe. For all things are related, through identical elements in world and world, even out to the farthest reaches of space.
I love it.
That's Guy Murchie, The Seven Mysteries of Life. That was written in the early 1970s.
Wow, fantastic. And I agree 100%. And yes, I consider not just you my cousin, but sure, all the animal kingdom. I mean, as you know, I'm throwing this huge family reunion. Pets are welcome. Giraffes, whatever you want to bring, they are part of the family.
I'll bring all my plants.
Yes, absolutely need that.
But my question is the book going to cover all of these cousin kingdoms, or is it just the human kingdom?
No, it is actually. I'm going to have a whole chapter on that. If you keep following the family tree back and back and back, then you see that we are all part of one big family. I had never considered rocks. I was sort of limiting myself to living organisms, but I obviously am thinking too narrowly. I now have to include rocks in my family tree.
Well, I think what's an amazing thing about a rock, it's crystals grow, right?
True. Yeah.
To a certain extent. But I mean, I think that we'd probably have to allow ourselves a little bit more imagination for that. But I have talked to some, perhaps a little bit more enlightened folks who, believe obviously we've come from some stardust somewhere.
Right.
So, what part of the cosmos have we emerged from?
I know. I love to think about that. And I did read Bill Bryson, who's a writer. Do you know him at all? Mm-hmm. He's great. So in his book on science, he says that our atom, we have so many atoms that are constantly replenishing, and that at least one of them in your body came from Napoleon. Now, I'm not sure that's scientifically valid, although he is pretty legitimate. But I just love that idea that, as you say, we are stardust, and we are just made up of a mishmash of everything, of other people, of other animals, and it's fantastic to think about.
In a way, it's we could think about it as a sort of reincarnation, if you will.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I don't believe in the other kind of reincarnation, but I think I can definitely get on board with this one.
And what do you think it is about wanting to know where we come from? What is that fascination? Is it more along the lines of like, oh, I wish I were related to like King Louis or Brad Pitt, or is it really trying to get a sense of like who we are and where we emanate from? What's that secret sauce? What
That's
are people
a great
looking
question.
for?
I think that it's partly both, and it depends on the person. But I personally like seeing the line that connects me through history. So seeing how far I can go back and what my ancestors did. And yes, occasionally an ancestor will be famous, but most of our ancestors were, washerwomen and guys who worked on the dock. And so one thing that it makes me feel is a tremendous amount of gratitude, just because these people's lives were unimaginably hard. The good old days, they talk about the good old days. The good old days were hard. They were the worst. The good old days. I don't know if you want to keep this to be clean on the iTunes.
No, go right ahead.
They sucked. They sucked so bad. And they were, they were disease-ridden, they had short lives, smelly. You can't imagine walking down the street in Brooklyn, the horse poop and the corpses from animals that were butchered. It was just horrible. So, and medicine. I mean, imagine surgery without anesthesia. It's just mind-boggling. So seeing what my ancestors went through gives me a tremendous sense of gratitude.
And just stepping back a little bit, how did you come up with the idea of this book, just for our listeners? Sure.
This came about because it's been about 2 years now, and I got an email from a stranger, and he said, "Hello, AJ. I've read your books, and you don't know me, but I'm your 12th cousin." And I was taken aback and thought, as you might, he's going to ask me to wire $10,000 to Nigeria. But it turns out he's part of this group of people, scientists and researchers, who are helping to build the biggest family tree in history. And it is not a tree anymore. It is a forest, an Amazonian forest, since I think you would appreciate that, being a lover of plants and forests. But it started out with thousands, then tens of thousands. Now it's literally up to 240 million people, all on a single family tree, all connected by blood or marriage. And so I loved this idea. It was just so mind-boggling that now, we'd always heard we're one big family. Now we have some scientific proof, and you can actually see how you're related to all these other people on Earth. So, I can look and see how I'm related to a friend from camp or Barack Obama. Barack Obama is my fifth grade aunt's husband's brother's wife's seventh grade nephew. So I love that. You got to go up and down.
Are you memorizing this?
That I did have to memorize. I can't memorize them all. But I thought, let me memorize the president. Often it's by marriage, and you have to do some path work. But the fact is, we are all related, and this just blew my mind. And I decided I wanted to pursue this as a book and also as an event. I thought, if I have all of these millions of cousins, why not throw a party celebrating this fact and invite all of my cousins and make it the biggest, weirdest family reunion in history. So that's what I'm doing.
And when is the event?
The event is June 6th, 2015, and I hope you'll come.
I already signed up. I'm coming.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, it's going to have...
and it's here in New York.
Here in New York, although it is worldwide, because we have branch parties all around the world that are going to get the live stream, because we have over 30 speakers like Henry Louis Gates and Dr. Oz, but comedy like Nick Kroll and Andy Burowitz. And we also... I've just tried to, and activities for kids like potato sack races, things like that. But just this past week, I'm excited because I booked a rabbi, a reverend, an imam, a Buddhist monk, and an atheist. So they're all going to get on stage and do like a joint sermon. So that's sort of the idea, just to make it just this carnival of craziness and diversity and music. And the finale, we're singing We Are Family with Sister Sledge. They are coming from Arizona, where they live now.
That's amazing. I mean, you're almost like accentuating the family like craziness. Like when you go home, it's this like little pot of craziness, but you're almost like accentuating how weird and fabulous family is.
That's right. Yes. And it definitely will be. The thing about that, hopefully this will be so large, thousands of people, that at your family reunion, you might get cornered by, Uncle Vern, who you don't want to talk to for an hour. But here, there's so many people, you can just avoid Uncle Vern and just go meet the most interesting people you can find.
And is your 12th cousin invited, or is he coming?
My 12th cousin.
The guy who inspired the book.
Of course he is. Well, he lives on a kibbutz in Israel. So he might be going to the one in Israel because there is a branch party there. But I would love for him to come. We've got some very interesting people coming from all over the world, like Norway and Dubai. So I'm totally psyched. It's going to be a multi-ethnic extravaganza.
How are you taking the family photo? Is it going to be from the air?
It is a drone. That's right. I hired a drone. I want to break the world's record for biggest family photo. So we've got these thousands of people in the field because it's on the grounds of the World's Fair in New York, at the New York Hall of Science, which is an amazing venue, and it's huge. So we have all this indoor and outdoor room. So plenty of room for you. I hope you'll bring all of the Oakes, every single one of them.
I'm sure my dad's retired now. He needs a thing to do.
Fantastic.
I'm sure he'll come up for this.
That would be great.
Yeah, that's I think it's a marvelous idea. When I first met you and heard what you were doing, it brought a lot of happiness to me. Although I have to admit, it was probably about 2 or 3 years ago now when somebody had reached out to me and said, "Oh, are you related to so-and-so? Because I think I look like you, and I think that we might be related."
Interesting.
And my initial reaction was, "I don't have time for you. You're not related to me. Go home." And I don't know if that's a bad reaction to have, but maybe it was like in the time that I was where I'm just like, I'm so busy. I don't have time for my own family, let alone an extended family who might not even be my family. Is that the right reaction to have?
Well, it's certainly a common one. I have had many people who email me back and say, "Is this a scam? What are you trying to pull?" But weirdly, I think if you approach it with sort of enthusiasm and passion, then people have gotten on board. So more people than not have said, "Oh, that's a cool idea. I love this," especially if you can tell them that they're related to their heroes and show them how they're related to, Barack Obama or Ronald Reagan, if you're a conservative, whoever you want, Beyonce. So if you say, join this tree. So it's not just like your family. You're joining this massive party in the human race. And that, I think, is what helps get people interested.
Now, you mentioned that your 12th cousin was using this. He's part of like a team of scientists and looking at putting our family tree together. But if one of us or one of the listeners wanted to go out and see his or her family tree, what are the tools out there that he or she can use?
Well, sure. I mean, one way that I would recommend, not to plug myself, but I'll plug myself, is globalfamilyreunion.com. If you go there, we have a form you can fill out that's just your grandparents' names. And then we have researchers, hundreds of wonderful researchers who are looking to figure out how you're on the family tree. And we're using tools like there are two big revolutions going on that make this possible. One is DNA testing. So there's family tree DNA and 23andMe. And another is the internet, where people are building these family trees not just alone, but together. They're collaborating, like Wikipedia. It's basically Wikipedia, but with family trees. So you have thousands working on the same tree, and they combine them. So you have one tree, and you just sort of interconnect it. And there's Genie, MyHeritage, Family Search, Find My Past, all sorts of good ones. Mokava, there's a lot to choose from. Wikitree. So all of these are sort of in a race to see who can unite the world first. Because we are going to, in about 10 years, if we go at this rate, we are going to be able to have one tree, one world tree for everyone, almost everyone.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, you mentioned 23andMe, and I got that as a gift this past Christmas, and I haven't yet done it because you can't mail it out of New York. So I have to go
that's
somewhere.
True. They make it complicated.
They make it a little complex, but you've done it, no?
I have done it, and I found it fascinating because basically you just scrape your cheek for a while. Oh, no, maybe this one is spitting. One is spitting and one is scraping. I think this is spitting. They send your saliva off to a lab and they analyze it, and then they'll send you back a list of hundreds of cousins that you have throughout the world who are also in their database. And they could be anything from second or third cousins to like seventh cousins. And then they'll also send you your ancestry, where in the world your ancestors came from.
And they go far back.
They go far back, right. I mean, all of us started in Africa, so it does go back there. And then there is mine, unfortunately, was not as interesting as I had hoped.
Oh,
I know, because I am mostly Jewish. I'm just like European Jewish. I wanted,
I would have never guessed.
I know, I hide it so well, but I did get 1% Scandinavian, so that made me feel good because this was a horrible winter. As you know, I'm like, well, I'm Scandinavian. I can survive this. And your background, you were telling me you've got Polish.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we were equal opportunity employers. But I have to, just in the sense that it's just a mix of things. But
I'm jealous.
I often do wonder about family trees because, okay, yes, the genetic thing is one, but when you're plotting your family tree, for instance, I was talking to my grandmother, who is kind of like our historian on my mom's side of the family. And even to a little extent on my dad's side of the family, she just knows everything. She's the grandmother that reads the obits, who knows, who lives on that end of the street and who lived on that end of the street 40 years ago. I always thought that my grandfather was a Kozlowski. But it turns out she admitted 2 years ago that she was adopted by him.
Interesting.
And had married her mother after his wife, which was her mother's sister, had passed. So in that kind of day and age, it was like natural to, kind of marry the sister of. And she admitted that she didn't want me to say the name of the person, but admitted that that her mother and this gentleman were very young and they had a baby and he ran away. So it turns out that I thought that I was, maybe Polish on both sides, but his last name of this gentleman who had ran away was a dragon. So I may not be as full Pole and be more puff than I am Pole. And so
that is a great last name, Dragon.
It is a wonderful, and I started to look online to have a little bit more of an idea of what's the...
Is this sort of like Game of Thrones? You're part dragon? You're like that?
It could very well be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the exciting part of trying to dig back into your family history is getting a sense of, if you're related to Puff the Magic Dragon. This does give me a little bit of pause about a family tree because who you think you might be related to may very well not be who you're related to.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's fascinating. And DNA testing is doing this. It's showing that a lot of people you thought were your ancestors are not your ancestors because there's a lot of hanky-panky going on back then. That's human nature. So, yeah, there are estimates anywhere from 5% to 10% to 3% of our are what they call non-paternity events. It's a very nice euphemism for that your mother and father were having an affair. But I will say, one thing I love about studying this is that we are in one of the most exciting times in the history of the concept of family, because it is changing so rapidly. You've got gay marriage and sperm donorship, surrogates, open adoption, learning that your parents, that your great-great-grandparents are not necessarily your biological ones. And I love it because I think it expands the idea of family. We don't have to just have a very strict definition of family. To me, this has opened it up and made us realize that we have more family than we ever realized. And I like that personally. There are people who object, as you read the newspaper, they don't like this definition of family, but I think the more people in your family, the better. Because as my 8th cousin Hillary Clinton says, it takes a village.
It's really true that it takes a village. And some of the things that you were saying just actually spurred a whole other thought process in my head, because I hadn't even really given thought about the idea of like sperm donors and gay marriage and how that really kind of, in some ways, and adopting, like having a gay couple adopt a child, like it just gets so convoluted that at the end of the day, you just have to accept a wider definition of family in order to be able to
absolutely
produce a family tree.
Right. The family trees are going to get more and more. And then about a month ago, they made this ruling in England where you can have DNA from 3 different people in one conceived egg, because they can take, if you have a disease, if one of the parents has a disease, they can take the disease DNA out and put in someone else's DNA. So imagine that. Now you have 3 parents. That is insane. Think of the family trees on 3 parents.
Well, who's to say that our culture is right? Because I remember reading the book Sex at Dawn. Have you read that book?
I haven't.
It's fantastic. It's very well done. And he looked at, I believe it was a maternal group in China. So it's maternally led. And anthropologists went in, quite long time ago, actually. I think when the explorers were traversing into this area, they thought they hit the jackpot, because these women they found were very open and loose, if you will.
So they were excited for their personal selves?
For their personal,
not
personal
just
exploration.
I see. Not just for academic. Because, participant observation, that's what anthropology is all about. So I see they were participating in that culture.
Yeah. So,
great. Good for them.
Some of the anthropologists were asking some of the children within this group of Chinese women, who's your father? And they would say, well, that is my father, this is my father. And he would list maybe like 5 or 6 fathers. But it turns out that the women who had the say in this particular cultural group had sex with all of these men, but it was because they wanted to assume the greatest qualities of all of these individuals.
Very interesting.
In order to be able to procreate the best child.
Right.
So, that man might be an incredible hunter. That man might be very attractive. That man might be incredibly intelligent. And so she would sleep with all of these men. And of course, if an explorer came around, thinking back in the 1200s or 1300s, well, he doesn't look like any of us, but he's sailing the ocean blue. That's exciting. So, I will surely take him into my house. And they actually had names that loosely translate in the English language to the father who stirs, the father who puts it in, the father who explodes. And it was really fascinating. So I think that, our definition of father and mother, again, our family trees are crafted in order to be able to cater to our definition of family, but who's to say that our definition of family is correct?
Right. I love that. I'm going to include that in my book. I'll give you credit.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll give you the book before you leave, actually, if in case you want to
that is great.
Quote the passages.
I mean, I certainly do believe in biology, and that they probably did only have one biological father.
Absolutely.
But I love the concept. And also I've gotten a lot of emails about all these different cultures, like in Hawaii, the word cousin, everyone is your cousin just because everyone's part of the family. And then in Scotland, I got some guy who said that people would call each other cousin as well, even if they didn't know for sure, but they just assumed that they were cousins. And to me, it actually does change my perspective a little. And it may be idealistic, but I think the idea of being able to see how you're cousins with someone, it makes you a little bit more prone to be kind to them. And I'll give you one trivial example. Judge Judy, the TV personality.
Absolutely.
I was never a fan. I always found her incredibly obnoxious, just nails on a chalkboard. And then I found out she was my 8th cousin 3 times removed, and it sort of shifted my mind. I'm like, you know what? She's probably not so bad. She's like underneath all that. She's just a nice cousin Judy. And it made me more tolerant. It made me try to see the good in her. And I think that's a very trivial example, but I'm hoping that, and I believe that since I've talked to all these people working on this project, it does change your perspective, and maybe it can even nudge you away from intolerance, because racism and all of these ideas are based. If you look back at history, a lot of the terrible things we've done, racism and genocide, they're based on this idea that one race is less human than another. And now you can see they're not just the same species, they're the same family. So it's going to make it just a little bit harder to be that, to look down on and be so tribal and so horrible to other parts of the human family. And that's my hope.
That you're touching upon something, because we, first we're talking about like, the interesting nature that we might be related to somebody who's noteworthy, or just really finding out what genetic stock we come from. But you're hitting upon something totally different. And what I'm hearing from you maybe is this your greater message beyond the book, or is there a greater message on this book?
Well, to me, that is the key, that we've got to realize we're all so incredibly close. We share 99.9% of our DNA with other humans. So we really do need to be a little kinder and work together to solve these huge, massive problems that we have today. So that, yes, is a bigger... And another big message for me is just the democratizing nature of this idea, because sometimes when people talk about their ancestry, it's a very elitist. I'm descended from the Mary Queen of Scots. You're not, so you can't be part of my golf club. But this shows that we're all so intertwined. There is no such thing as racial purity. We're all so intertwined that it's hard to be snobbish. I can trace to Mary Queen of Scots through marriage, admittedly, but still there is a line. And so I love the idea of making it inclusive instead of exclusive.
And you are a journalist, I suppose, by training. I mean, you've written a number of books, and are you still the editor over at
I am an editor at large.
So what does that mean? Are you just a large editor?
I'm getting larger, unfortunately, especially with this. I'm stress eating. So, but I would say no. It means I don't go into the office, and I don't. I don't put on pants as often as I should.
So you walk around naked, basically, in your house?
No. I definitely I have the boxer briefs and sweatpants usually.
So, I mean, being a journalist, I would imagine, and maybe this is getting a little off the topic, but I would imagine, when we write about things like tribal feuds, religion, the Sunnis against the Shiites, whatever it might be, it in a way kind of fuels this disparity that we feel like we have with one another. So how can you, as a journalist with still journalistic integrity, be able to start painting a picture or maybe connecting the dots between how we're all related versus what differentiates us?
That is a great question. I'm going to have to work on that. Maybe we say, like, we start every article and just say, by the way, the Sunnis and Shiites share 99.9% of their DNA. They should keep that in mind. And then go into the details of how horrible they are to each other. I don't know. It's a great question. But it is certainly, that is one of the driving forces. And that's why, I'm very excited. Wait, did I mention this? Now I did not get enough sleep last night.
Go ahead. What?
This might be a repetition of something I said 7 minutes ago.
Go right ahead. What is it?
That we got a wrap. Did I mention
Yes,
that?
you did.
Okay.
Right in the beginning.
Oh my God. I told my mother last night. That's why I was like, no, and you're not my mother.
And I'm not your mom,
No.
but I am.
You are my cousin.
I am your cousin.
That's right. You're probably my mom somehow.
But I know that that could be quite disturbing because I don't think we're close cousins. Although I'm surprised by that because for how good looking and intelligent you are, I would imagine that we were a little bit closer.
I wish we were closer. I want some of your good looks and intelligence. Well, the thing is, we're probably related 1,000 different ways. The way that I found so far is not a very close. We are 44th cousins.
44th? I thought you said 43rd last night.
Okay, no, 43rd.
Okay,
thank you
all right.
for the
I
correction.
thought we just got docked,
No.
docked a generation.
No.
I got downgraded all of a sudden.
No, you will. If anything, we'll be up to 42nd or 41st.
Okay.
No, I am on a mission to find something closer than 43rd cousins.
Well, now that you have this published book on my father's side that actually goes, I mean, it says 1901, but it actually goes back to like the 1700s, which is, I think, pretty fantastic.
Well, you are in good shape because certain sectors of the population are much better documented than others. And you come from some, as you said, some very early movers to America. So they keep very good records. So we're in good shape.
Okay, that's fantastic. But you are my 43rd cousin through my grandfather's grandmother, Bertha Bookout.
I love the name.
I love the alliteration.
Yes. Well, that helps. I got to say, if you have ancestors with strange names, then it is a huge, because the Smiths and the Millers, those are tough.
Yeah,
but
they really
Bertha
are.
Bookout, there was only one Bertha Bookout in my family tree, and it was your Bertha Bookout.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's really great because it helps fill the gaps. Because as I was talking to my grandmother last night and this morning, what I love about it is this like colloquial nature to it. She's just like, oh, well, Grandpa Bookout lived to be 98. And they know all these different types of things, but they can't remember the exact date that he was born or maybe where he or she was born, but they have all of this like memory of, their grandparents in their minds. And it comes through in this, at least the Stephen Miller book, which is part of my father's family history. That's this little publication. It's funny because like you'll read a piece in it where it's just like, and even at 94 years old, he was able to still jump onto the back of a horse.
That's great.
And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, that's kind of the most important parts of family that you may or may not remember or that get recorded. And it's the stuff that really sticks with you.
It's true. Those family stories. And I love hearing about my family stories. And also one thing I love about it is just how it embeds you in history. Like I found out it was my great grandparents went west in a covered wagon, which we're from the shtetl, we're Jews. I never pictured that. And we were actually reading Laura Ingalls Wilder to my kids. And then when I was able to tell them that our ancestors actually got in those covered wagons and they, took all their pots and kettles and they went out to St. Louis, it really, I think it makes history so much more personal because you are a part of it.
There's also something else that I began to appreciate. And I think part of it as we age, we want to say, how long will we end up living? And your family, I mean, you are not only what you eat, but what your family ate and your family's, your mother and your grandparents ate, and, has a big way into, big lens into like how we, how long we might live.
That is true. That is true. And actually, when I wrote a book about the Bible, and when Judaism started, they did not believe in the eternal life of the soul. You achieved immortality by your offspring, that you stayed alive in your offspring. So I lean more towards that too. So, and the good thing is we are, even if you don't have direct descendants, we have so many offspring, either through your own children or through your sisters and brothers or cousins' children. I mean, in like 9 generations, I'm going to have hundreds of thousands of great grandkids, and I love that.
It's really amazing to look at it that way. I mean,
by the way, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Our grandkids are going to marry each other, so we are going to be in-laws.
If we have grandkids, that's what I was just going to say. I'm a little bit worried about this Oakes lineage because my father's 2 brothers do not have children, so it really rests on the shoulders of myself and my brother, and we are the 2 least likeliest kids to have kids. So out of like my family. So it was like my brother and I had this like running bet about all our cousins, at least on our mom's side, of who's going to, marry and have children first. And, pretty soon we were like, oh yeah, we're both, my brother and I both had it like pegged, so we're kind of tied. But now we're down to ourselves. So it's kind of like flipping the coin of who's going to happen first.
Well, listen, even if you don't, you've still got cousins who have kids, so your genes will continue.
It's
don't
so
worry.
True. When you were looking through all these people, I mean, I know you mentioned Barack Obama is however many cousins removed, but were there any others that were really closely related to you that you were really shocked by?
Well, I do share a good amount of DNA, and I'm like 4th cousins with an actress named Mayim Bialchik. Is that how you say her name?
I have no idea.
She was on Blossom.
Oh, wow. But she wasn't Blossom.
She was Blossom.
Oh, she was Blossom.
She's Blossom. Yeah,
oh my God, that's amazing.
I'm cousins with Blossom.
I could totally see the resemblance.
So that is exciting.
Have you reached out to her?
I haven't. You know what? I really have to.
You should, because I'm sure she's not that difficult to reach out to.
No, and she's into science. I know that
she is. She's super nerdy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and she's on
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, Big Bang Theory.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
right.
I mean, the funny thing is I have reached out to almost everyone else. I mean, that's part of the fun of this is it's almost like the new LinkedIn. So I'm able to figure out how I'm cousins with someone that I want to meet, and then I approach them. I thought for the book it'd be good to interview one of the presidents, so I figured out how I was related to George H.W. Bush, and I reached out to his chief of staff, and I was able to, I was like, we are cousins. So she's like, well, if you're family, then I guess you can come down. And I went down, I interviewed him. It was wonderful. I'm a Democrat, but still I respect him. And I've done the same thing. I actually write a column for People magazine once a month called Interview with My Famous Cousins. So I've interviewed Daniel Radcliffe and Ludacris was a funny one.
That's amazing. I've actually shot with Ludacris multiple times.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
That is so funny. What did you shoot?
When I was a correspondent on Discovery Networks, he had a show with Tommy Lee Jones, believe it or not. And I had to help them green up their life a little bit.
That is hilarious. I love it.
And in more ways than one is it hilarious, but yes.
Good for you. Well, he is your cousin, so
that makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And I was able to. Well, this was weird. One of the researchers found a document that his great-grandmother had done an interview, a long interview, with an academic about what life was like as an African American in Chicago. And it turns out he had never seen that document, so I knew way more about his family than he did, including the fact that his great-great-grandfather was Jewish. And I told him, I was like, I'm Jewish, and you're mishpucha. And it took him a while to process that. He did not know. He's like, wait, you're telling me I'm Jew? I thought I was a black man. You're telling me. I'm like, well,
but there are black Jews.
Right. Yeah. I did say, definitely. And he is, mostly African American, of course, but we're, a mix. It's almost always the case that we're a mix.
That's always so revealing. And also like a hard pill to swallow for some, I would imagine. And I would also imagine that in looking at one's family tree, there are some people who have maybe privacy concerns. Has that ever cropped up?
Oh, yeah. And it is a problem. I don't have the answer to it. But of course, it is going to continue to be a huge issue, especially with DNA testing, because a lot of people are going to find out that who they thought was their biological grandparent was not necessarily their biological grandparent. And I don't know the answer to that, except for trying to have this wider definition of family and realize just because someone didn't have direct DNA that went into you, they could still be your ancestor. They could still have an influence. This
again, I think, we have such a narrow definition of family in our culture. And one of the things, at least from working quite a bit in Africa in the past, what was always so beautiful, I felt, about many of the cultures that I met is that they didn't really have a definition for orphan, because the community would take care. If somebody was bereft of their mother or father, the community or the aunts, their uncles, would take care of the children. Unfortunately, with the advent of AIDS and viruses like that, it has ruined the family structure. But in a way, I thought that was really beautiful. The fact that you would never have a word for orphan. Think about that.
That is a wonderful thing.
It's
absolutely
a wonderful thing that you could just come and accept any child under your home.
And it is interesting. I'm going to have a chapter in my book about kinship terminology, because it varies so much from culture to culture. I think we have very confusing kinship terminology in English, because, your uncle can be the guy who's married to your aunt, or he can be your mother's sister, and, your cousin. What does that mean? There's so many different flavors of cousin.
Right. And when you said how you're related to Barack Obama, which again is what?
He is my 5th grade aunt's husband's brother's wife's 7th grade nephew.
I can't even process that. Even if we stopped the podcast and you took me through every single one, I think unless you drew it out for me, I wouldn't be able to comprehend it. And I think, if I could just quote my last podcast guest, Simon Sinek, is that he's mentioned that once our brains get past 150 people, like our clan, our brains start to explode. We can't process scale.
That is true.
So how do you expect people to, I guess, comprehend the vastness and the breadth and the girth of our of our family tree, our own family tree?
Well, it's a great question, and I think there are some super creative people who are working with me and beside me who are coming up with visual ways to represent these family trees. And there is a guy who, for the family reunion, is making what he calls the Global Family Reunion 100. So 100 historical figures and celebrities from all over the world, and he's showing visually how they connect, just what you said. So you can actually see the pictures and the lines. And I think that is one way to do it. There have also been people who are creating these three-dimensional family trees, because it is such a complicated, as we said, it's such a complicated data set to visualize. And I love the creativity going into this.
This might be a little bit of an unanswerable and maybe a slightly morbid question, but if you present, say we had this knowledge, in plain black and white, DNA proof, and we went back in history and presented it to the Tutsis and the Hutus, or in Rwanda, or if we presented it to Hitler, what do you think the reaction would be? Like, everybody is you are probably very closely related to, the people who you are going to go out and think about hurting. I mean, do you think it would change people's minds?
Well, that is a great question. And as you say, a lot, probably unanswerable in the historical sense. But my hope is that in the future it will change your perspective a little. And there have been some studies that indicate this is true, that you treat people who you think are related to you better than you treat a stranger, even if it's a very distant relation. I would like to see more studies on this, but I've read a few that are very interesting. And one of them actually had to do with what you were saying, that woman who approached you because she said that you looked like each other, so you must be related. There's a study that says you treat people who look a little bit more like you much better than you treat people who don't, because perhaps we are genetically programmed to think, oh, they share our genes, therefore I should try to protect them a little more. So yeah, my hope is yes. And until we invent a time machine, I'm not sure about the Hitler one. I will say I was talking about the Hitler time traveling with my kids. This is totally off topic, but there's a great short story by a funny writer named Simon Rich. You ever? But it's a very, very short story, and it's just like about a guy who invented a time machine, who went back in time to kill Hitler as a baby, and he gets there, and everyone's like, "What are you doing? Why are you killing a baby?" And he's like, "No, you don't understand. It's Hitler." And they're like, "What are you?" And then he gets arrested and killed. So that's the end of the story. So it doesn't always work out.
No, I mean, and I think that if you take those things out of context, it's fascinating to think of, but it's like, but if you take it out of context, you can't justify it at any. It's hard to justify.
It's hard to kill Hitler. Yeah. Hard to justify killing Hitler. I could still do it. I could still justify that. I'm okay with that.
But I imagine, though, that now that we have this knowledge, like you said, in the next 10 years, the whole world is going to be deeply connected, and not just genetically or through a family tree, but through communications, and it will be a very interesting world indeed. Any kind of predictions that you might have once we are all connected?
I am hopeful that it will change our perspective. It certainly has mine. It has made me a lot more prone to look for the good in people, because I think that tribalism is very, very dangerous. I do say I like being part of a group. I think that's built onto our brains, that we like being a part of a group. That's why sports are popular. And I like being part of the Jewish community. But I like those walls to be very, very low, so everyone can get over them, and very porous, and people are coming in and out. Because if we build the high walls between the groups, that's when we start having wars and violence. So yeah, I'm hoping that this idea will lower the walls and keep them nice and low.
We're going to be moving into the last section. And this is more of like audience questions as well as rapid fire questions, I suppose.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want to make sure I get these right. Unfortunately, people didn't have like super serious questions to ask you, but they're funny nonetheless.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so this one is from Jocelyn from Ontario. And she asks, do you think more women would want to be closely related to Ryan Gosling or less women? I would imagine it would be a total buzzkill if you knew you were sleeping with your girly cousin.
Well, the thing, when I did the 23andMe testing, I had my wife do it. And guess what?
She's related to Ryan Gosling?
Well, she is that. That's true. But she's also related to me.
Oh,
she
no!
is my cousin. Yes, I am a cousin Stupper. So, yeah, that.
Well, it sounds like you didn't come from very, varied genetic stock.
No, that's true. Yes. On my ancestors, we're all sleeping with each other. But, we're like 7th or 8th cousins. But the truth is that we are all, since we're all cousins, we have to get over the idea that you can't sleep with your cousin. I mean, I think most people have issues sleeping with their first cousin, but not everybody. There's going to be a chapter in my book all about first cousin marriage, which has historically been very common. And this was fascinating. It is illegal in half the states and legal in half the states to marry your first cousin. And there are people who see this, not a lot, but who see this as the next marriage equality fight. So like gay marriage, why shouldn't first cousins be allowed to marry each other? It's actually a very old taboo, and the chances of hereditary of passing along diseases, it's slightly higher, but it's slightly higher if two people with an Alzheimer's gene get married. Are you gonna stop them from getting married? So it's a very interesting ethical question.
Wow, that is fascinating. And it actually is right into what John from San Jose was asking. He said, how many cousins away do you have to be not to be considered inbred?
There you go. That's exactly
so
it.
Even on the first cousin, it may or may not happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it does raise your chances of genetic mutations a little, but I would say not genetic mutation of passing on diseases a little, but not as much as people used to think. So it's a very tricky and kissing cousins. And here's a crazy statistic that for anthropologist at Rutgers wrote that 80% of marriages throughout history, from the time when humans started, 80% of marriages were second cousin or closer.
Wow.
Because,
it's who you know.
Yeah, it's who you know. That is exactly right.
And I guess a lot of people did a lot of traveling.
Right. Yeah, you were just, whoever was in your backyard. And
the kings and queens, of course, wanted to keep it within the family.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So if we're descendant from any of those, then you'd imagine. So I would also imagine, though, that if you go far outside of your cousin kingdom, you would maybe genetically, you might be better off.
Yeah, there is certainly, I think, people say for your immune system, they're sort of the perfect distance away. You want to share some genes, but not all. So yeah, I think I failed personally in that. Of my kids, I think so far, thank God, have not gotten sick, but I did not do well by them. I should have married. I should have,
should have married.
Should have gone far off. Should have gone to India or China. Should have been part of that group you were talking about, where the women sleep with all the explorers.
Unless you get that time machine, no hope for you.
No hope.
So if in 10 years, everything's plotted out, will we come up with, say, an Adam and Eve?
Well, it's a great question. And we do I don't believe in the biblical version of the Adam and Eve story, but scientists do talk about Adam and Eve. It's called mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. And these were the ones who we all descend from. Then they were only about 150,000 years ago. And we all have a little chunk of their DNA in us. And so they are all our great, 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 great. Keep saying that about 5 minutes. They're grandparents. They are the most recent common ancestor. And now it's not the way the Bible portrayed it, because there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at the time. But these are the two whose DNA has survived in a unbroken line. And so yes, we do have an Adam and Eve, and I love that idea. I love that we're all from these two people.
Yeah.
And we'll never figure out who they were, their names if they had them, but they existed.
It's really fascinating. I mean, they probably are not who we would want to descend from if we saw them in a picture book. There's no way that I'm related to that paramecium.
That's true. Yeah.
Here's another question for you. If you had to pick 3 people who are alive now to be related to, who would it be?
Oh, that's interesting. I've thought a lot about historical figures like Ben Franklin, but alive now, that's a good one. Well, let's see. Luckily I've been able to figure out how I'm related to everyone.
Closely related to
closely related,
because that changes things. I think if you're closely related to somebody, you could go and say, you know what, I am your second cousin,
right?
Or
exactly.
But so who would it might be that you like? Would you bump Barack Obama up?
Certainly, that would be great. Although he's only got a couple more years, so maybe I should bump up Hillary. Or I think certainly there's the mercenary way to go, which is Bill Gates, and because then he could fund the global family reunion and make it not just in 30 places. It could be in like 1 million places.
Could be in his backyard.
That's a good idea for next year. What about you? Well, let me throw that question at you. Who would you like to be a second question? Second cousin.
Geez. I think Elon Musk would be interesting.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I know he's from South Africa, I believe. I wouldn't mind to have having a braai with him. I also think he's fascinating, the fact that he's like doing things more for creating change. He would be good. Plus, you could borrow money from him. He's got some nice. On one scale, I don't think it would be. It would be. I have a hard time asking people for money, even when it's my family. One thing that I've always had to like work on. Who else I think would be interesting? I don't really have like any type of desire to be related to an actor and actress. I think that might be a common kind of move for somebody, but I don't find that really fascinating. I think like it would be really amazing to have been related to like some real renegades, unfortunately now he's passed, but like a Nelson Mandela type,
sure.
Like something that, and again, is this just through association? Of course, if I was related to Nelson Mandela, I would be I wouldn't be able to contain myself, So, I would imagine just like, who are the other like real renegades? Who's a renegade to you that you think would,
Let's see.
There's not a lot of renegades any longer. Not in this country, at least.
That's true. Well, I mean, when I do tell people, when I'm saying how cool it is to join this family tree, I'm like, you can be related to George Clooney and Nelson Mandela. I always throw in Nelson Mandela because, as you say, people like the movie stars, but who can, it's hard to argue with Nelson Mandela. I'm sure there are people who, that's a great question. There are so many people I admire.
I know.
I also don't. This is totally off topic, but I don't like the idea of heroes. Because I think people are complicated, and that if you call someone a hero, then you're ignoring. Everyone's got their great qualities, and everyone's got their not so great qualities, and so I like to. I don't like to say, I don't like to take one person and put them on a huge pedestal because
I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you.
Except for you. I think you are a hero and you have no negative qualities.
I would also, there might be a tactical way to answer this question. I would say all of the men that had pursued me, but I never really wanted to date, if they found out that I was their first cousin, that may just change their temperament.
Oh, interesting.
So there could be some tactical ways to answer that.
So that they would not bother you.
Would not pursue. And be like, why would you pursue your first cousin? It's illegal in 50 states, or in 50% of the states.
I like that. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of women pursuing me that I need to fend off, so I don't have that. I don't need that tactic. But I could see that you would, sure.
It's not how I would answer the question initially, but I just thought it was funny.
That's a great idea. I like it.
Okay, so now we're going into the rapid fire questions.
All right, let me see what I got.
The piece of news you wish were more in the press.
That's a good one.
And not the global family reunion. I'm sorry.
About more features about my books. I would say, well, you know what I would like is just a more accurate look at reality. So, we read about a plane crash or car crash, which kills a tiny percentage of people, whereas something like a heart attack and heart disease and Alzheimer's, those kill huge numbers of people every day. But the problem is, no one would click on that if you say another 6,000 people today died of a heart attack. If you did that every day, you're not going to get a lot of clicks. But it would be better for us as humans because it would make us realize we got to eat healthier and do a minimum amount of exercise. So I would rather have very, very dull news all the time. So people would just be hit over the head with the obvious. The
realization that we need to take care of ourselves.
Exactly. And each other.
Creativity is?
I think creativity is being able to adjust to new situations and solve problems and adapt. I actually have done a couple of experiments where I tried to be as creative as possible and figure out all these tactics. And it was interesting. I mean, one thing I loved was learning how all these people get through writer's block. So, throughout history. So there's, Nabokov, the writer, he wrote Standing Up, and
he wrote Lolita standing up?
He did.
Wow.
He did.
It's a fantastic book.
Ben Franklin liked to do something called an air bath. So he would take off all his clothes and just walk around naked. So you can try all these, and someone else took baths. I forget who it was. And so, yeah, standing up and taking baths and being naked. Maybe that's the secret.
What do you do to get rid of writer's block?
Well, what I do, aside from all those things, is I just start writing, and it doesn't matter what. I just start typing, and it could be complete gibberish, and it usually is. It could be about the pigeon on the windowsill outside. But then once you get in the momentum, then after about 20 minutes, then your writing starts to make a little more sense. So that's what I do. I just move my fingers over the keyboard.
Fantastic. Your biggest fear is?
My biggest fear is... Well, it's not very interesting, but that something bad will happen to my kids.
That seems really reasonable.
It's reasonable. Not interesting, but reasonable.
Biggest challenge was or is?
Biggest challenge is not being overly concerned with criticism and with because as this age has made clearer than ever, whatever you do, there are going to be people who disapprove, people that, as Taylor Swift calls them, haters. So being able to, as she wisely advises, shake it off.
My friends call that NGAF, not giving a fuck.
I like that. That's a little better.
No song was ever sung about that, I don't think.
No. But I do give a fuck. I want to give enough of a fuck about what people care about, because I don't want to harm other people, but I don't want to give a fuck if they're just criticizing for because it's
just
easy.
Because it makes them feel better about themselves.
Exactly.
When do you feel vulnerable, or I feel vulnerable when, or vulnerability is?
I feel vulnerable when, certainly if, let me think. I mean, in my books, I do try to be as honest as possible. And, since I'm human, I have a lot of flaws. So whenever I put a book out, I'm always terrified that my flaws will outweigh my good parts in people's minds. So putting out a book is a terrifying and vulnerability making enterprise.
Your greatest supporter in your life?
My greatest supporter? Well, certainly, I do have to go with my wife. I mean, not that interesting, but she is, she, in my books, she sort of plays this character where she's always rolling her eyes at all of my wacky antics, but which is true. But deep down, she is, I think, she will support me.
I mean, she did marry you.
She did marry me. That's true. But it would be interesting to see how far you could push that.
Oh, I hear another book coming on.
That is true. Because you don't want, I don't believe anymore in unconditional love. Because if my wife started slaughtering puppies, I would stop loving her. I don't love her unconditionally. There are conditions.
There's also another fascinating book that I just read, or had the audiobook of, Female Brain. And she is a neuropsychologist and who wrote the book. And I cannot remember her name for the life of me. I never remember the author's names sometimes. But so she said that a woman's brain could change up to 25% throughout her lifetime, whereas a man's brain doesn't really change at all. So when a man will often say, well, you are not the woman that I married, it could very well be true that 25% of her is not. And she may become a puppy slaughterer for all you know.
Exactly.
Or a puppy lover if we go on the other side.
That's true. It can be better. People can get better.
The final question. Oh, no, those two questions. Why you do what you do?
Well, I do it partly because I love it. I feel so lucky that I have this job where I can be a perpetual student and learn and experience other lifestyles. And I guess I do think, and this is quite possibly delusional, I do think that the lessons that I learn and am able to put in the books make some people's lives a little bit better. So that is partly what I do, but I hate saying it because it sounds pretentious.
And your words to live by.
Words to live by. Well, one of my favorite quotes is from the guy who founded Habitat for Humanity, and he says, "It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting," which means that even just pretending to be good or pretending to be confident or pretending to be optimistic, eventually you will start to become a little bit more confident, optimistic, good. So that for me is a big secret in my life, is just faking it, just total deceit, deceiving myself.
I love it. I mean, it reminds me of an author now who also said, if you can't imagine what it's like, or if you are scared to go up on stage, imagine being a person who can go up on stage, or
exactly.
In a way where they have these like laughing parties. I know in India, where even if you're just laughing, your body is fooled into the benefits of laughing, even though if it's not funny, but seeing other people laugh could make you laugh, and then it's this reciprocal effect. So
I did one of those.
Did you really?
For one of my books?
Oh.
Yeah, and it worked. It was, for the first half hour, it was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. But then you couldn't help but start to laugh genuinely after a half an hour of fake laughter. It was hard, but it was interesting.
I really love that. And so how can people tap into the Global Family Reunion? How can they find you?
Oh, well, I would love for them. Everyone is invited. And it is at globalfamilyreunion.com. So just go there and you can either just buy tickets. You don't have to be related. But if you want to be in the family, then also there's a little form you can fill out with your grandparents' names, and then we have these researchers who will help connect you. But I would love it. I think it's going to be very fun and very weird, and I'm excited.
And where can we find you on social media?
Oh, at AJ Jacobs is my Twitter, and Facebook /AJ Jacobs, and AJJacobs.com, all that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, AJ. This is wonderful.
Thank you, Cousin Summer. I loved it.
Thank you, Cousin AJ. I like saying that. All right. Well, thank you so much. And if you want to know more about Idea NOSH, you could go to summerrayne.net/podcast. And you could also find us on @SROAKES. Thanks a lot.